Also, the internet can be a driver in the problem of radicalization. It's very, very easy. By the way, when we look at countries where the greatest percentage of people are connected on the internet, you know what country it is? Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, more connected there, right, than any other country. So who are they? Again, we have to take this with a grain of salt. The first one is pretty clear. Someone says, well, if you wanted to profile people, who should you profile? I went, males. We're doing it, right? I mean, if you really wanted to do it, if you really want to look percentage, don't go after Muslims, go after males. That would be more logical than to go after Muslims on this. But males, under 35, and we're hearing that that number's creeping down, that they're becoming younger and younger and younger. One study was, actually several studies were saying it's often between 18 and 26 that we're seeing this. Often residents and citizens of Western democracies are the ones who become radicalized. And it's very interesting that we're seeing more and more a second and third generation kind of phenomenon. I'm really hopeful that we'll look at that one a little more, because we may find, as we dig, that that's not the case, or we may find out what the reasons for that being the case are, right? We don't know enough. We just don't know enough. I remember when President Bush said, we can overcome the problem of terrorism if we address economic issues, because it's a problem of poverty. It's not a problem of poverty. It's not a problem of poverty at all. In fact, most of the terrorists are from middle class or upper class. The vast majority are also educated, have a high school education or higher. Boston kids, educated. Timothy McVeigh, educated. His IQ was in the very superior range, right? Bright kids who were doing this. Recent converts to Islam can be especially vulnerable. That's an issue for the Muslim community to take up. I know my Christians talk about discipleship, helping someone become, become a real live Christian that practices. Muslims, right, have a process that they can go through to help get people educated. They don't begin as Dr. Ali was pointing, they don't begin as radical or even devout Muslims. Some writers today talk about a born-again phenomenon that these people kind of go through, right? I have talked to so many Muslims who say they found their Islam when they came to the United States, because it was the first time they actually had to think about it. In their country, they were just surrounded by it, right? You didn't have to think about it. Here, you actually got to think about it. And often they got to think about it when their kids reached dating age, right? That's when they really began to begin to think about that. Having 2 daughters, I understand that. I hate all young guys. They're awful. I tried to get commission a little head mounted on a podium so I could put it on the mantle, so when the boyfriends came in, I could go, that was their last boyfriend. He only made one small mistake, and look where he is. They tend to be rather unremarkable individuals, living seemingly ordinary lives, jobs, and little, if any, kind of criminal history. Okay, I think I'm going to stop there. Thanks so much.
What I will do is I'll actually now put a little bit of names to some of these things, and that becomes somewhat more relevant. I think you've seen something in a similar type of a pattern in discussion right now about what happens over time. And there is a phenomena about what happens in a young person who's a teenager or late teenager's mind, where they do not have the capacity to control their impulses. And I think this is well recognized about the impulse-related challenges amongst the youth, and that's why they're being looked at as targets by these people. And there's a lot of studies that have been out there which tell us that these individuals may not be able to make a good choice in some of those decisions, and maybe if we reflect on our own selves, we may recognize that. It's a sociological problem, if you will. There's multifactorial components to it. They're inhibitors and they're catalysts. Now, this is going to hopefully bring us towards understanding what we as a community or any community should be able to look at. I'm just going to go through some of the things that have already been mentioned. But this is a part that you need to recognize, and more so for the non-Muslims in the audience. When we look at the Muslims, we have broader categories, and if you get two Muslims in a room, there'll be about 5 opinions, but I'm going to jump in this. There are Sunnis, which amount for 85% of the population, then there are 15, the Shiites, 15%, and then there are the others, and then you know the percentages aren't adding up. But there are a minority of other Muslim communities that are out there as well. But within the Sunni community, there are 4 what we call the madhahib, the different schools. And then these are the Hanbali, the Maliki, the Shafi'i, and the Hanafi. And within the Hanbali, and which is a majority of them are non-Salafi, and a very small percentage of them are the Salafi Wahhabis. And then that is something that is a phenomena. Now, Steve has mentioned about the description of black and white. Of how things are looked at. This is right and this is wrong, and I'm right and everybody else is wrong. I'm going to heaven and everybody else is going to hell. That's the sort of a mindset. Now, within this, I've divided them into different categories, which are the apolitical, who actually are passionately against any type of political activism or activity. And then there are the ones who are very political, and then this group potentially goes into one of the takfiri group, which is in Qutubi, which is defined as who feel that the other is, even within their own community, evil. They actually say, look, I am right, I am more conscious of my faith, and I follow my faith more so, and you are not a part of that faith, even though you claim to be a Muslim. And that's part of this. What we don't know is this a process or is it not? I am of the bias that it is a process, but again, there's no data to prove this. Now, how do I know some of these things? Why do I know when I'm a Muslim? Who knows that? But I actually was one of the individuals who actually went to England, United Kingdom, and spoke to these extremists, the terrorists. And I had the chance with the US government, with the British government present, to try and talk to them and then explain and understand, okay, so what happened and what happened? How were you recruited? Who talked to you? Who spoke to you? And went through the whole process, and then I said, okay, then how did you see light? Because it is almost like putting on, I'm a physician who's a critical care doctor, but I'm also a public health person. So I look at a disease and I say, okay, what do we need to do in the public level to try and prevent this from happening anymore? Because that's the whole mindset, is that when you identify a problem, you say, how do you prevent it? Because it is a problem which is a social, political, religious problem, and that's why we have the community and environment here, where we have to look at the social environment, the religious groups, again, the political environment, because it's all linked together. Within the Shiites, we have the Jafri, the Ismaili, the Zaydiya, and the Twelvers, which is a larger group within the Shiites. And then within the other Muslim sects, we have the Druze, the Baha'is, the Ahmadiyya, the Nation of Islam in the US as well. So let's look at, and these are patterns and beliefs which are not diagnostic. And so I don't want people to start to do the diagnostic. Yes?
85-15 worldwide?
Yes. So again, the people who are in that group, the takfiri group, they have some patterns. They are isolationist, anti-democratic, anti-integrative, focus on control of women, and that's like a passion, or almost pathological at times in my mind, intolerant to Muslim with any differences. It's saying, oh, you're not doing this, you're not a Muslim. And against poetry for honoring Prophet, beards are not trimmed, judgmental on who goes to heaven and who does not. They're so focused on the individuals, and they are looking at, oh, you're going to go to hell, or you're going to go to heaven. I'm going to go to heaven, you're going to go to hell. That's the mindset that is there. And this is a phenomena that can happen in any faith. This is unfortunately a human phenomena where people look into black and white, where they look in absolutist terms against innovation, declaring things sinful that are not, extreme rigidity in the matter of faith, and totalitarian, literalistic, and within because this is a subgroup within the Sunnis, they have an extreme hatred for Shiites and Sufis, and that's what you'll see is the murders and killing that are going on in the various Muslim world. That's going on against music, more interested in correcting others' beliefs than their own, hatred for people of other faith, willing to use wrong action for achieving their means, and whatever is not in their control is evil. And this is what you see in some of those people. Well, they're not just coming out of nowhere. There were theologians that they're following. And there's Ibn Taymiyyah, who was a scholar back in 1200. And this was, in many ways, the father of the movement, because he's the one who actually started to present things in black and white. And then he actually started to say, this is how it is, this is how it's not. And at least all the people that I have studied, they were at one point or the other have been influenced by him. And then the Wahhabi term, we use Wahhabi, Maulana Abdul Wahhab, he was the revival of this movement, who said that I'm a student of Taymiyyah. And then this list goes on, but there's Maulana Maududi that you were mentioning. He's also an individual who is of the Wahhabi Salafi mindset. And that the Salafi mindset is, now I'm not saying they're terrorists, but that is the absolutist way of looking at things. When you become absolutist, you are at a risk of looking at others a little differently. When you look at others a little differently, and then you feel that there are injustices that have happened to people who look like you or believe like you, then you become at a slightly higher risk of moving in the wrong direction. And I spoke to somebody from the FBI, and they said some very interesting things. And they said, you know, you want to know what a terrorist, why they do this? Ask them. And when you ask many of the people what was their first thing, these were because of some US policy or something that they were using as a trigger point. But there were multiple other things, like Alia was saying, was that it's a process. You don't wake up one day and look in the mirror and say, oh, I'm an extremist this morning. It's a process. So again, there are virtual component and there are physical interactions. And then if there are opportunities of somebody physically educating them or virtually educating them, now with the internet, that is happening. And the websites that are there, which are trying to indoctrinate the children and adults right now, they have no legs to stand on. And this is a challenge that we have as a society, because there are no safe spaces. As soon as I'm going to go hit that website and counter it, FBI is going to knock at my door. So the Muslim community, majority of us in the US, we are not going to those websites and countering and saying, you are wrong, this is not what the faith says. Because we know as soon as we are going to counter it, FBI is going to actually come there one day and say, oh, Mr. So-and-so was going to these websites and radical websites and you cannot do that. So the Muslim community lives in a fear. The critical conversations that need to happen in the mosque, we cannot have it. You go to a mosque where the children are supposed to have these critical conversations. Those conversations are not happening because they know that there are about 2 FBI agents sitting in the corner or other people. That's the perception of the community with the paranoia that has developed. That actually leads for them to not even have the conversation about the elephant in the room. And since the elephant in the room is not discussed, these children who are very intelligent go to the websites. And when they go to the websites, and they interact with the others who may be giving them wrong information. And again, that's where, God forbid, somebody starts to become operational. There are components that we need to actually identify and have a role in it. Now, we've looked at what goes on in the mind. When the mind is gone crazy, if you will, not literally speaking, we need to look at how that mind is going to have the body act. And if the body is going to act, then we need to have a collective responsibility of how we're going to do this.